Hello again, colleagues. I think we're ready to resume with a couple of items in the cultural domain. First of all, the Culture Programme Board Assurance Report, and Fiona is going to take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. So you'll see our Culture Programme update is reporting amber this time, as assessed at the end of April, and that reflects the significant and sustained pressures that were being experienced across NHS Highland in the reporting period. And that's meant that much activity has had to pause in order to allow our colleagues to focus on delivering care and services. The programme does have to report amber in this situation due to the pause and the impact. But all of the signs are that in the next period, we should be in a position to progress our plans and return to green. It's important to note that the status reported in the dashboard is that of the Culture Programme and its delivery plan. It's not in itself a status of the organisational culture. But although much of the planned activity, especially around delivery of training and interventions, did have to pause, our people processes work stream continued to deliver on track, and we've had increased visibility of our data around cases, and we've had some further ones for Scotland training being rolled out. In preparing data for one of the reviews that the Chair and Chief Executive attended, we were able to confirm that 30 of our 35 bullying and harassment cases that were raised in 2021 actually attempted early resolution, and to date only 11 of those cases have progressed to a formal investigation. This is a huge step forward for us, really demonstrating an increase in trust and confidence and a willingness to try and resolve relationship issues at the point they break down. It is only a small step forward. We've still a lot to do, but it is a significant one. It's also an exciting period of transition for the Culture Programme, and as Lorraine's been talking us through the Together We Care strategy, we've always known that the Culture Programme is a very long-term transformation programme. And having built some of the foundations and support systems, our ambitions and intentions for culture are now firmly embedded in the people elements of Together We Care. And they'll be delivered and monitored through that annual delivery plan. Moving culture firmly into the mainstream of our strategy and our plans for the future is key, as culture is everyone's responsibility, and we will all have to work really hard to effect the long-term changes that will impact where people work. As part of this, we will be establishing an integrated people programme board to oversee our progress, and that will involve mapping our activities from the Culture Programme and also from the Workforce Board, whilst creating detailed delivery plans for these and new pieces of work. We will continue to give the board and our governance committees and leadership structures visibility and oversight of our progress as we move through this. And just to touch on wellbeing, and obviously at the start of the meeting, there was an outstanding board action for us to report on progress. We have got a working group in place and the plan is starting to take shape. But as this is one of the ambitions of the people element of the Together We Care strategy and will be part of the annual delivery plan, we want to ensure that we include any feedback from this next phase of consultation before finalising the detailed plan. So the target completion date for that will probably push out to August. Work is well underway, but it is really important to us that that feedback that we get from colleagues and the wider communities from our ongoing engagement shapes that. And you'll have seen that the strategy that we presented today was very much evolved as a result of that engagement and consultation, so we don't want to miss that. Finally, we had been hoping to receive the final report from the independent review panel this month, as Pam had mentioned in her introduction. As all the cases have now been heard, but due to the delays, we will be convening that additional board meeting on the 28th of June. And that meeting will be dedicated to discussing the fourth organisational learning report, the final overarching report of the panel. We'll also be touching on the progress we've made with the actions from the organisational learning reports and also the recommendations from the Sturrock review. We'll also be able to review some key statistics about participation in the healing process. And finally, in that report, we'll take some time to show how those people ambitions and actions from the Together We Care strategy are really aligned to the actions we need to take going forward on culture, so that we can continue to deliver on these through the strategy and the delivery plan. My report proposes that moderate assurance is taken. Progress with many of the key elements of the culture programme stalled due to the demands on colleagues in the system, and so that has limited our progress in this quarter. However, I am confident that we are now restarting, and the reshaping of the approach that we've just outlined will really reinvigorate our progress, and we would be aiming to return to substantial assurance by the time we talk in July. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fiona. Questions, comments for Fiona? Sarah.
Thanks. Yeah, it wasn't a question. It was just a comment to really endorse what Fiona said there about the this being a really good opportunity to embed that culture work across all parts of the organisation, all functions, or all disciplines. We've obviously been discussing it at length in staff governance, and we'll continue to do so. But we absolutely recognise that for this to really, you know, for the teeth to really take hold, it has to be fully embedded, and not just be something that is seen as HROD's, you know, responsibility alone. So just to really welcome that, and to support Fiona in that. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Any further comments or points? Alex?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Fiona, thanks very much. Yeah, building on what Sarah said to start with, I'm still trying to get my head around when we're moving and how we're moving to that. This is business as usual, not this is part of this overall programme. Because I think we, like Sarah said, it gets it embedded, and therefore it becomes business as usual in all the operational units as much as we can. A very minor point, looking at your project dashboard, sorry, programme dashboard, and it's great, but I can't see a date when this is when it will be completed. So what's the final date? Because things are amber, and that's fine, and there's work for the next quarter and all the rest of it, but there's no focus of it. There's no point where I can say, right, they've got 9 months to run. Are we 3 months behind? Are we 2 months behind? What are we? So it's see if we can pick that up. Thanks, Paul.
Fiona?
Yeah, thanks. So yeah, I think that business as usual point is really important, and I think as we move into being part of that annual delivery plan and the people programme board, I think that the key actions that we've got sitting underneath that are much more about things that, whilst we will enable and support the rollout, they are things that each individual must do, you know. So performance management, that kind of rollout, what we need to support from the centre is about creating easy to use sort of processes and templates, and make it easy for people to have objectives and for managers to know what to do. But actually that is only delivered when every manager sits down regularly with their colleague and talks about how they're performing, talks about their development plan, and completes that. So there's a number of the big pieces of work, you know. So for example, another big piece of work in our future plan is around the rollout of promoting professionalism, and the civility saves lives, and that is absolutely delivered. Again, it's enabled through a big programme of work and training, etc. But that is a tool that will be used in each individual workplace, supported by peers, to ensure that sort of issues and conflicts are resolved and addressed right there and then. So I think that absolutely does mark our sort of transition of, we'll still need to be providing a lot of support and enabling, but things will not change unless they're rolled out locally. I think the point about the plan is really good as well, because, and I think again, in moving into this people programme board, and into the annual delivery plan, what you will see, so far we've got the high level actions and ambitions. What we will now be developing is a structured project plan with milestones right across each of the individual pieces of work, but then rolling that up into an overall programme plan. So it's really sort of going a further stage on from the current dashboards. And that's really important, because I think we need to be able to sort of understand what other things, both within the people space, but also in the wider delivery of the strategy, are going to be happening at similar times, because it's really important that we don't set ourselves too much to do, and that we're realistic about when we can deliver things, and that we make sure, we've got a 5-year strategy. Some of the things we will have to do at the start will be enablers for other pieces of the strategy, but really having that almost kind of air traffic control view of not just what's going on in our world, but in the broader strategy delivery will be key.
Okay, Pam.
I think the other important aspect to this is, as we embed performance management throughout the organisation and the people component of that. So, Fiona's given us a headline of the bullying and harassment stats for the organisation. What we would want is for local managers to understand and be able to understand what the figure looks like at a local level, alongside sickness and absence, alongside listening and learning survey, alongside iMatter. What indicators are there in your area that the culture is progressing, in a good way, and where do you have areas that look like they're perhaps in trouble, and therefore how do we support those managers and leaders to address that? So that performance management in terms of the people measures is, I think, really important in this space, which again amplifies the recognition that needs to be given to this.
Thanks, Pam. Just picking up on that point about the measures, that we have the iMatter survey coming up next month, in June, the month of June, but we also have the listening and learning panel being established, and there's a danger of overkill, I suppose, in that for certain members of our staff, and just to be wary of that, and maybe to do a bit of staggering of time scales.
Yeah, and I think that the listening and learning panel is going to be really important, because the people that we've reached out to and contacted aren't the people who are usually involved and engaged. So we're really hopeful that in establishing that, we get a good response to that, and that people who maybe find it more difficult to connect with us and engage in input will have that opportunity on a range of different topics over the next year or so.
Thanks, Fiona. I don't see any other hands up, so I'm hoping that we can note the update and take moderate assurance from its progress. Hands up, thumbs up, thank you. And we can move on to item 14, the quarterly whistleblowing standards assurance report for Q4. Back to you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so we've got into a rhythm now with the report. So this is the report from January to the end of March 2022. And as we talked about before, in July, we will be bringing our first annual report, and we're currently working on what that'll look like. And we've had some guidance from the INWO on that. And I'll actually be speaking with the national team later this week, just around a few points of clarification. What we also want to do when we roll out that annual report is really use that as an opportunity over a number of weeks to promote the standards again and make sure everyone's aware of them. So we're going to produce a bit of an infographic, a sort of one-page summary that pulls out some of that key information and is really sort of digestible for colleagues. And we'll also be able to use that with the wider public. We also have our whistleblowing process document that's currently being finalised, and that's the final outstanding action of the audit that was carried out earlier this year. And again, that being part of the communications and engagement around the annual report in July will be a good point in time to launch that. In terms of the data within the report, we have had one further stage 2 complaint that was raised in Q4. It is currently being investigated and relates to concerns about access to a particular service within the acute division. I'm supporting that investigation, which is being led by one of our deputy medical directors and our deputy nurse director. This quarter, we also closed one of our outstanding stage 2 concerns, and that was following the implementation of an action plan to address concerns over service provision and delivery in a remote and rural setting in Argyll and Butes. So in summary, over the first year, we've had 5 whistleblowing concerns raised to date, of which 3 have been resolved and 2 are still open, and there were a further 9 concerns raised that weren't categorised as whistleblowing. It does continue to be challenging to identify themes or trends because we have had such a low number of cases. Our average stage 1 timescale, for example, is 1 day, and that's because we've only had one stage 1 case and it was able to be closed within 24 hours. Stage 1 concerns are those concerns that can be addressed in 5 days, so we're on track with that. And but the reality has been for us that most of our concerns have been much more complex stage 2 concerns. They do take longer to resolve. To date, they've involved long-standing complex issues, as I say, around the design and delivery of services. But each of these has presented us with the opportunity to agree terms of reference, to undertake detailed investigations by an experienced senior manager, and then we've created detailed action plans and overseen delivery of these plans. And we do deliberately keep the concerns open until either the majority of the actions have been concluded to everyone's satisfaction, or that we hand them over into an ongoing redesign or oversight process that can then pick up that. And this ensures that we really embed the learning from the issues that are raised, and we can then apply that across other areas or settings. Our average time to complete a stage 2 complaint is 214.5 days, but that is basically from 2 complaints that we've resolved so far. The standard set out that if you can't resolve the complaint in 20 days, we have to update the complainant every 20 days if further time is needed. And we have been doing that in writing with all of our stage 2 concerns. And I say our priority here is really about ensuring that we work collaboratively to resolve the issues, and not just to resolve the initial concern, but to do that in a sustainable way that leads to lasting change. Our whistleblowing non-executive director, Bert Donald, has continued to make his visits across the board area, and he promotes the standards and listens to colleagues' feedback and experiences, and I think he touched upon that earlier. Following visits to Caithness, Golspie and Inverness in early February, Bert is back in Inverness this week, and his schedule's being published to colleagues through the weekly updates. So I think there's been good engagement with that. So you'll note that I'm proposing moderate assurance be taken. We are making good progress and have robust systems and processes in place, but there is further work to be done to continue to promote awareness of the standards, and particularly to deliver that final action of the audit, which is the process that we're due to launch in July. And I think once we've done that, I would be hoping that by the time we come back with the annual report in July, we would be able to propose substantial assurance at this time. So I'll pause there and hand back to the chair.
Thank you, Fiona. Comments, questions for Fiona on her report? Alex and then Bert.
Maybe let Bert go first, because I think he's going to comment on the thing overall, and then I'll come in with a question if that's okay, Chair.
Sure, thanks. Alex, Bert.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alex. I guess just to add to some of what Fiona has told us, she's given us a very full and comprehensive assessment of where we are in terms of the standards, and we're now over 1 year into it, and what we're considering today is the 4th quarterly report. From my perspective as the non-executive director with responsibility for whistleblowing, I felt it was sensible and appropriate to take stock after 1 year to consider where we are on the journey. And I've met with Fiona and indeed others to look at where we are. And I think Fiona's right in what she says. We have made good progress. There are things that still need to be done. Fiona touched upon awareness of the national standards, and that is an issue. And the communication of this is something that much thought has been given to, but I think we need to continue to consider how we deal with that. And that's something that became evident from my visits yesterday, in fact. But that aside, the board is required, in relation to what the standards tell us, to consider where we are in terms of learning, and indeed in relation to emerging trends. So Fiona has described to us about the learning, but in terms of emerging trends, the numbers are relatively low. So my assessment of it is too early to be making judgments on emerging trends. We're still on this journey, and these relatively low numbers make identification of trends a little tricky. In these cases that Fiona has talked about, there have been some pretty complex things, but they have been getting worked through. And as Fiona said, these do take time. And the important thing is that communication with people who raise concerns is continued during the process. As part of that taking stock that I referred to earlier, I have wondered about the data collection. And are we capturing all of the concerns that are raised as whistleblowing? So the numbers that are featuring in the report are those that have been raised through official channels, probably through the confidential contact service provided by the Guardians. But are there other concerns that are being raised under the banner of whistleblowing but are not being recorded as that? And this is a conversation that I had with Fiona, I think maybe it was last week, I can't remember, but it was quite recently. And I think it's something we need to be looking at a bit more closely in terms of data collection and ensuring that, I guess, each health board area is approaching it in the same way. And from that conversation, I know that Fiona is going to be raising this with the INWO, and as she said, there is a meeting with the INWO later this week. So I think it's just something to be mindful of in terms of the data collection and what numbers that actually leads us to. So I guess that's all that I want to say just now, and perhaps invite Alec to come in with the point that he was going to make. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Bert. Yeah, building on the data set, I'm looking at the KPI table on page 65, Fiona, and I don't know if it's you or Bert that can answer this one. That number that weren't concerns, weren't classed as whistleblower concerns, 9, 75%, it's never mind that. What happens to those? I mean, clearly they're not, I would hope they're not being ignored. They should go into the system and somebody's looking at them. The other thing is, when you go back to people that's raised the concerns, is it explained to them why it isn't whistleblowing? Because some of them may think, well, I've done something wrong here. Clearly they haven't. We want them to raise concerns. So it's more that's the communication side of it. And then the other bit was number of concerns which weren't whistleblown but were passed to Guardian Service for resolution. Is that, obviously, again, that isn't a common route because there was only one of those. So what other routes are available? Again, is that back to the standard being too rigid to make it whistleblowing because of the protections that whistleblowing actually gives us? And is that something that we need to address too? Thanks.
No worries, Alec. I can pick those up. So yeah, in terms of the complaints that weren't whistleblowing, and actually interestingly, I think almost all of these, apart from one, were in the very beginning, the first couple of months of the standards, and most of those were actually they were perhaps from people who weren't actually in scope of the standards. So it was maybe kind of people who, because the definition is about, doesn't have to be our employees, but it's about the delivery of NHS Scotland services. And so I think with all the promotion around the whistleblowing standards, we had quite a few things that were just not ours to address. I think the primary kind of other reason was where people raised things that were had already been subject to another process. So for example, a complaint about recruitment, which had already been through 2 stages of kind of review and feedback. And whilst the person wasn't happy with the answer they were getting, we'd sort of, in reviewing what had happened, the processes had been properly followed. And with that, what happens, and it's one of the benefits of using the Guardian services, our sort of confidential contacts and also data points, is that a couple of other cases may not have fallen under the strict criteria of the whistleblowing standards, but actually the Guardian service is able to talk to people and listen to their concern, and if need be, take that forward as a Guardian service concern. And we've had, I think, certainly in the period from about kind of August through to sort of April time, I think we'd had about 200 contacts into the Guardian service through the normal concern raising channel. And the reason I raise that is because that does actually give us a little bit of comfort that there's quite good awareness of the Guardian service across key bits of the organisation. There's always more we can do, but I think that connection really sort of helps us. So I think that the other question you had, did I pick that up? I'm just trying to remember if I covered.
Yeah, it was about whether or not the whistleblower standard was just too rigid, because clearly an awful lot of it falls, as I said. But having answered the why to begin with, I could actually understand that. That was more of a lack of understanding that people were raising it rather than anything else. So thanks.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And I think it is really important, because actually coming back to a point that, you know, I think both yourself and Bert have made, we want to hear when people have concerns, and we've got multiple channels, and actually we also, you know, we work hard to ensure that kind of colleagues and managers in the organisation understand how to respond when someone is concerned about something, and that we kind of act on that appropriately, and take time with that, whichever channel it comes through. And I think just to maybe cover off Bert's points as well there, I think there is always more work that we can do to promote raising concerns, to promote awareness of the standards, and to make sure we've got safety nets in place. We're not aware of concerns that should have been raised through the whistleblowing process that haven't reached it. But that could be the case. The sort of safety nets we've got in place around that is that typically when someone has a concern, one of the channels they will use, if not the Guardian services, into the HR team. And so the HR team are fully trained and briefed on what the whistleblowing process involves, and can help people navigate into that. We also obviously have got systems like Datex for reporting of incidents, and some of the things we work on there is understanding that if somebody was to raise something that might fall under the standards, the team that manage the data there can support us in looking, you know, sort of looking at that and taking that forward. So I think, but there's, as Bert has sort of said, there's always more we can do, and the more we can sort of raise awareness and help people understand all the different routes for raising concerns, the more we'll be able to address them effectively, whichever process we use.
Thanks, Fiona. Susan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this report, Fiona. It's really helpful to see, and Bert, for your comments too. My comment is about the time taken to resolve the stage 2 complaints. Obviously, the standard is 20 days, and we're taking maybe up to 10 times longer than that. I know it's really important to do it thoroughly. Will we get faster at resolving it as we learn more about the process, or is the 20-day an unrealistic expectation? Because that, you know, someone waiting for this information, you know, the sooner they get some kind of sense that there's progress been made, the better, obviously. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. And it's a really good point. And I think it's a bit of both, because I think as we've proceeded with stage 2 concerns, we've got we've got better and slicker at it. I think to date, pretty much all of the stage 2 concerns we've had are about quality and service in quite a big area. And so what we've ended up doing is commissioning quite a large scale investigation. In the case of the one that's still open from the previous quarter, it's actually involved kind of setting up a consultation group with the community and with members of the public, with our services and other sort of professionals. So we sort of try to fit the sort of approach we take to the situation, and the one that I was just describing there is a situation that's been a bit of a wicked problem for probably more than 10 years, and actually we're very close to closing that satisfactorily now. So I think actually what one of the benefits of the whistleblowing process has been in giving people confidence to bring forward things that maybe have just not seemed able to be resolved, and given them a new focus and a new process, and also then helped us understand, if that's happening over there, what else might we need to do in other places with similar issues. But I do think we will also get a bit slicker where we maybe have slightly less complex concerns that come in.
Bert.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just to pick up on Susan's points and to, I guess, echo Fiona's comments. I think there is a bit of both here. There is a bit about, as you become more experienced and more familiar with the standards, the investigation and inquiry process will become slicker. But that said, some of the cases are very, very complex. Some of them are long-standing, and some of them, to be properly inquired into, will take time. So will the time element improve? Well, it might, I think, in some cases, but I think it all depends on the complexity and the nature of the concern that has been raised. And the important thing, as far as the person raising the concern, they must be made aware. Indeed, Fiona talked about this earlier. They must be kept in the loop and have the communication so that they're aware of the progress that is being made. Thank you.
Thanks, Bert. Did you want to come back in, Susan? Okay. And just picking up on Bert's earlier point about the need for standardised ways of reporting, I think that's going to be important in terms of getting comparative data across the boards to see how our figures relate to others' experience. And also, I think the point about the various channels that you mentioned, Fiona, of whistleblowing, that we have the Guardian service, yes, but we also have Bert as whistleblower as a direct route for many people, and to capture all of the different channels in one document would be useful going forward. Thank you, Fiona, for the report. And colleagues, can we take moderate assurance from Fiona's report on whistleblowing standards? Yes, okay, thank you. We move on now to item 15, strategic risk, a corporate risk register, and there's two elements to this. First one with Boyd to speak.
Thanks, colleagues, and the paper had previously been written by Miriam Morrison. It's now passed over to, so it's linked with strategy and the strategic intent, and therefore the risks are being aligned to that. And so the paper has been written by Lorraine Cowie, who will be, I hope, available just now to say some words about it. But with that brief introduction, I'll just check if we've got Lorraine available. Maybe not.
I'm here.
Oh yeah, okay. Thanks. I don't know if you want to say anything since you've penned the paper, if you want to say a few words yourself, and then we can invite questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, we've tried to give you a simplified format for the strategic risk register, and thanks to all the exec leads who have updated their mitigations. As Boyd has said, and I think we've highlighted some things today from you, Alex, and others about how do we look at the strategy and embed the strategic risks moving forward. So as we align to the strategy and the annual delivery plan, and Fiona's obviously is going to add one today possibly, but how do we align that to our strategy and our annual delivery plan moving forward? So I guess we won't have that by July, but by the following board we will have a revised strategic risk register to complement our areas of work that we've highlighted, and happy to answer any questions about that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorraine and Boyd. Are there questions for them on the risk register? If not, can we take substantial assurance from the report? Yes, okay, thank you. And part B, compliance, strategic risk. A new risk to be added, Fiona.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I promise this is the last item I've got. So following our internal audit and root cause analysis around our compliance with the statutory and mandatory training, the Audit Committee, the Staff Governance Committee and the Risk Management Steering Group have all agreed with the recommendation that we should propose a strategic risk in relation to this item. And that's to ensure that our progress with improving compliance is giving the highest possible visibility. This risk is also on our level 2 risk registers, and these are currently being reviewed and updated to ensure that that current level of risk and the local actions being taken to mitigate these are aligned. You'll note in the SBAR and the attached risk register form that I'm proposing the risk is rated as very high at this stage, based on a current likelihood of almost certain and impact of major. If approved, this risk would be added to the register along with a detailed mitigation plan, and then updates on progress would be brought to each Staff Governance Committee, Clinical Governance Committee and the Board, as well as the Audit Committee. Some actions have already been taken around further communication around individual and management responsibilities for this, and our people partners have been working closely with their senior leadership teams, and we've also got a number of our professional leads who've been championing this with their teams. Our next steps are to set up a project team structure and a terms of reference with a small group of key stakeholders. And I think a key thing for us is that this will be integrated into the annual delivery plan and the Together We Care strategy as a core element of the people plan. So this isn't a standalone piece of work. A bit like when we talked about culture, that sort of project team work stream would be focusing on the oversight of progress and about designing and supporting key enabling actions. But the progress on this is absolutely delivered by the local management teams. A project team can only ever be an enabler, and that action and the effect, the sort of substance of the change has got to come from each and every individual colleague and line manager in NHS Highland, holding themselves to account for completing their training in line with their contract of employment and their professional registration where applicable. Nothing else is going to allow us to make the progress we need on this. So as set out in the attached form, we need to substantially improve our performance in this area over the coming months. The current level of risk to colleague and patient safety and standards of quality and care, along with the risk of enforcement action and prosecution, are outside our risk appetite and tolerance. So as well as requesting that we consider adding this risk to the register, in terms of an assurance report, I think at present only limited assurance can be given. However, with the escalation of the risk to the strategic risk register and the project underway and linked to our annual delivery plan, with some of those key actions moving forward, I would hope that we could then start to move towards a moderate level of assurance in the coming months.
Thank you, Fiona. Questions, points for Fiona? Susan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Fiona. And I really support, putting the emphasis on this. I think it's really important to us. Not, it's part of our culture piece as well. It shows how we, the importance we place in the quality of our staff and investing in them and their safety as well. So I think it fits really well with that piece. And we've made some comments on it for some time about how we haven't been able to shift the dial on this statutory training. So I think the more we can do to make that visible within the organisation, the better. Just a couple of small points about the actual paper. You under 2.4, where you've done that level of assurance, and I'm really pleased that you put your little comment underneath it, because not everyone's doing that yet, and you have. That's good. I don't want to be facetious about here, but when you say we hope that something could happen, I'd like a stronger statement than hope. I'm a great believer in hope, faith, and charity, but I think you could say something stronger than you would hope that it would happen, because you've outlined some very direct actions that you will take that will make the difference there. So that would be my input. And I think there's some missing words under 3.3. The statement under 3.3 doesn't seem to be complete, but fully support this going on the register and it having the emphasis that it's got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Graham?
Yeah, just to echo that, to support. These are often difficult bridges to cross, but I think it's absolutely essential that it's done. It won't be without pain. I think we've got to recognise that, and it will be a challenge. But I do think it sends a strong message of how important that this is to the board, but much more importantly to the wider organisation. So I fully support it.
Thank you, Graham. Alistair?
Yes, thank you, Boyd. I was going to raise this under the audit report, Fiona, because obviously we had an item on statutory mandatory training as an internal audit report, and it was agreed that Boyd Robertson and Ruth would take forward a session that we could discuss and circulate the report to the wider board, so that we can actually get some good debate and interaction on that. I was going to say I was going to raise it under the audit minutes, so I might as well raise it now. What since the audit committee meeting, and since you've had a chance to look at it, have you got any more thoughts about how this could be taken forward rapidly to ensure that we get as much compliance as possible, which will then mitigate and hopefully eliminate some of the potential risks that you've identified in your really comprehensive introduction? Thank you.
Fiona?
Yeah, thanks, Alistair. And I agree. We've been giving some thought, and obviously since we had the audit meeting, obviously the kind of discussions around the annual delivery plan and the strategy and how this fits together have all been sort of gathering a pace. And I think so in terms of our approach, I think linking it into that and very firmly committing to that and tracking it is a key part of this. I think we're just setting up the infrastructure around all the elements of the people plan and working out exactly where this would fit within it. And I think in order to make sure that this makes traction, linking it in to be overseen through the people programme board and through that plan is key. Emma Pickard, our culture advisor, has been doing a little bit of work for me in the last week in terms of pulling together a bit of a proposal about some of those targeted actions on people that we could pull into almost like a small project team to just push some of this forward. And I think it's getting that balance, as you say, about some people who can do some of the enabling, but making it very, very clear that project group in and of itself does not deliver the outcome of improving statutory and mandatory training. They are supporting, our teams and our colleagues to do this and to take action on it. So I think we should have had our first meeting in the terms of reference of that sort of short, sharp project team before the end of June, so we can really push this forward.
Alistair, do you want to come back on that? Okay. Alex?
Yeah, thanks for that, but yeah, thanks, Fiona. The bit on page 185 does worry me a little bit. Your further action required. Your first statement saying the action plan is expected to take until 2024 to fully implement. 18 months, 2 years, that's an awful long time to sit with that. Now, I know the risk won't sit as high as that, because hopefully the enabling stuff will bring the risk down. You're sort of, we used to call it a red team approach, where you get people in, they bang heads, you start moving things forward, that's good. But I agree with you, this is every single manager's responsibility throughout the organisation. This is not a project, it's not a board, this is their responsibility to make sure that this is done, and we're having the oversight to say, hang on a minute, you're not doing this enough, and you haven't been doing it enough for quite some considerable time. So I applaud it, I think it's right, but we need to keep a very close eye on this, be it at the audit committee, staff governance, wherever it sits, to make sure that we've got the performance of it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And yeah, and I suppose caveat around the 2024 was being open. That actually, I suppose there's some initial actions that need to be taken to bring compliance right back up and to do that short, sharp piece of work. The 2024 references some of that sustainability element, and particularly around, I see this as intrinsically linked to us fully rolling out a performance management framework across the organisation to each and every role. So the bit that I'm referring to in 2024 is actually us being confident that every single colleague in our organisation is having that development plan objective discussion, and therefore having improved our performance, we will never go back to where we are currently. So but I can sort of clarify that when it goes into the risk, there's a difference between the sort of delivery and sustaining.
Bert.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with everything that's been said. I've probably been quite vocal about this in staff governance committee meetings and in other fora, and it is a really important issue because it focuses on staff safety, patient safety and risk to the organisation. So it's important that we try and move this forward. But I don't think it's going to be easy. Every group I spoke to yesterday, I took the opportunity to ask about this, and there is a realisation and an expectation of the poor performance as things stand in relation to statutory and mandatory training. There is an understanding that statutory means statutory and all of the implications that come with that. But having listened to some of the comments from staff, I do believe that this is going to be difficult to get to where we want to get to, but that doesn't mean to say that we shouldn't be having the focus on it that we've talked about today. So it was just to say, yes, I support it, but we need to be realistic about the challenges that we're going to face in relation to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bert, and thank you, Fiona. I sense that we are of a mind to approve the addition of Statman training to the Strategic Risk Register. Yes. Okay, thank you, Fiona. Move on then to the first of a number of governance papers and to the board assurance framework and an update on progress from Ruth.
Thank you, Boyd. Yeah, so this report is focusing on progress made in implementing the findings of the review of our board assurance framework. And it highlights a few of the areas where there's been progress since the last time you saw this, which was in January. So there's some improvements in relation to awareness and understanding of assurance reporting, and I'm going to be rolling out some report writing sessions with usually write reports. Review of corporate documents. The terms of reference of the Executive Directors Group were agreed earlier in March. And of course, at your last meeting in March, the board agreed the work plans for the future board meeting. In terms of quality of board and committee reports and timely distribution, a schedule of preparatory meetings has now been established. Chairs and lead executives can consider the quality and timeliness of the reports and their contents. So the intention is that those meetings will address some of the improvements that were identified at last year's committee self-assessments. In terms of organisational strategy, well, as you know, that's coming to the July meeting, and that will then start to bring together some of the actions that are still sitting on the plan. And the elements that were relating to risk management have actually been taken out of this particular plan and moved into the risk management internal audit. So with the caveat that the risk management elements are moved away and the organisational strategy elements will imminently be coming into fruition, these actions are now deemed completed and have been deemed so by the audit committee. So I'm suggesting that you take moderate assurance from the progress. As you can see, most of it is now completed, and we're just a short distance away from the rest of it effectively coming into fruition. So it's here for you to note and to take assurance.
Thanks, Ruth. Any questions for Ruth? Anne?
Hi, it's not a question as such, Boyd. I just thought on this item it might be useful to just reflect on the introduction of the board assurance, the actual assurance framework for board reports. Not sure what other colleagues will think, but I think that the discussion today has demonstrated that that has been a really positive addition to the framework, and I think it was Ruth that brought this to our attention from some other boards that were using it. So I think thank you to her for that, and just you know, my own view is that this is already sort of paying dividends in terms of focusing and improving our discussions at board level. So I'd be interested to see if colleagues agree, and just to note that if there is agreement. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. I would certainly agree with that point. And I think there are refinements required of the type that Susan mentioned in her comments earlier. Generally, I think it's a step in the right direction, and thanks to Ruth for leading us in this direction. I think we had examples from Lothian board at one stage that helped us en route. Any further comments? Okay. We've just been asked to note the contents and take moderate assurance that progress is being made towards improvements identified in the BAF. So can I take it that we are content with that? And Ruth is back on again to tell us about the review of governance arrangements and what we're being invited to agree.
Okay, so since November last year, board and committee has been attending to essential business only, and you've suspended some of your development sessions, and you agreed at the last meeting to reconsider that position at this particular meeting. So this report addresses both the content of your committee business and your board business and the format in which we participate in these. So in terms of content, the report refers to a lessening of the pressure on the organisation. And on that basis, the recommendation is to reinstate the full scope of board and committee business and to reintroduce development sessions for committees. Obviously, a watching brief will be kept on that situation and adjustments made should that be necessary. In terms of the format of how we participate, it's proposed that we continue to use MS Teams for board and committee business meetings. And this is on the basis that doing so enables the board to contribute to addressing climate change by reducing carbon emissions. It reduces travel time and travel costs as well as communication costs. As well as that, in the same vein and on the same basis, the proposal is that as a standard approach, development and strategy sessions should also continue to be held on MS Teams. However, we do acknowledge that there are some benefits to be derived from in-person participation, particularly at informal meetings such as development sessions. So in relation to those particular meetings, the proposal is to offer discretion to the individual chairs of those committees to hold those meetings in person, should you believe so, if it's appropriate. So the recommendations are set out there in the report. First of all, to reinstate your formal board and committee. Secondly, that board and committee business continue to be held on MS Teams, and that your development sessions and strategy sessions as a standard approach should be on MS Teams, but that chairs be given discretion to vary that should they decide to do so.
Thank you, Ruth. Are there any questions or observations? Or are we happy to agree to these three aspects of the proposal? We are. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Ruth. And we move on now to Governance Committee's annual reports. And again, Ruth will speak to these. I think these have already been to Audit Committee.
They have, yes, that's right. They're here for your information. They've been considered by the individual committees themselves and have been submitted to and endorsed by the Audit Committee. Just for your information, the Audit Committee's annual report itself is yet still to be agreed by that committee, but will be coming to the June meeting of the board. So they're here for your information and for your endorsement.
Any questions for Ruth? So we're asked to note the annual reports. We're happy to do so. Thank you. Item 19, Community Empowerment Acts, and we're required to produce annual reports on these, on two aspects, asset transfer and public participation requests. Ruth again.
Okay, yep, they're here for your approval. Asset transfers, there were two applications for asset transfers relating to property in Memorial Hospital in Broadford and to Ian Charles Hospital in Grantown Bay. Neither of those applications were determined or resulted in transfers during the last financial year. In terms of public participation requests, we had one request during the financial year, which, due to the strict demands of the legislation, there were some technicalities which meant that it wasn't actually taken forward under the legislation itself. However, every effort has been made to maintain engagement and discussions with the requesters. So those two very short annual reports are there for information and for you.
So low levels of activity on that front. Again, this is for this time it's for approval, not just noting, but for approval of the annual reports. Are we happy to approve these? Oh, sorry, Alan, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, just for confirmation, the process had been started, but it's only notifications of interest at this point for the two transfers. So we're currently working with the communities around both of them. So it's just notification of interest at this point in time, although we are supporting their applications.
And we might well be revisiting these in the near future.
Yeah.
Okay, but this applies to the annual report for the year just ended. So we approve these, and we'll move on to item 20, the Gaelic language plan, delegation of authority for approval of the monitoring report. Ruth.
Yep, so this is just the same situation we were in last year, whereby the timing of the submission just doesn't quite coincide with our board meetings. So the board's asked to delegate authority to the board chair and the chief executive to approve the terms of our annual monitoring report on the progress with our Gaelic language plan. It needs to be submitted to Board na Gaelic by 14th July, which, as you know, falls out. So with that agreement in place, then a copy of the final report shared with the board at the July board
meeting. Are you willing to delegate authority to Pam and myself to approve the terms of the submission? Okay, thank you. Item 21, register of members' interests. Ruth.
Okay, yeah, that's just for your formal notification. We undertook the annual update of the register. It's now been finalised, it's on our web, and it's just for your information to note that that's actually taken place. It's a statutory requirement for us to do that. Just a formal notification.
So we note that, and we move on to item 22, is it? Model Code of Conduct?
It is, and this is my last one. Thank you. Again, this is just for you to note that, to confirm effectively that your agreement to adopt the new Model Code of Conduct was received and has been to all boards have been asked to publish the new Code of Conduct on their websites using their individual respective branding logo. And I can confirm that that has now been done, and Scottish Government have been informed that that's taken place. The new code and the guidance are now also uploaded on board members' induction documents on the Teams channel. And just for your information, I've been liaising with NES to scope out some kind of refresher training associated with the new code of conduct. I'll be able to confirm the details of that at some too distant future.
And there was a suggestion that we might have some development time on the code of conduct, on the revised code. But we'll keep you posted on that. Are you happy to note a formal notification? Thank you. And then we come to item 23, governance and other committee assurance reports, where the chairs of the committees give brief reports on any items that they want to bring to the board's attention, starting with Anne and the Highland Health and Social Care Committee.
I don't have anything specific to highlight, Boyd. Thank you.
Thanks. Gaynor, clinical governance.
Thanks, Chair. I've got two things to highlight to the committee, or to board today from committee. The first is around the sense that we're seeing a deterioration in some of the nurse sensitive measures that the committee look at. So, for example, those relating to tissue viability and falls. And we think this is probably an effect of the COVID pandemic, or the ongoing issues with that, potentially related to nurse-patient ratios. And so we're seeing a little bit of an impact there. I don't know if Heidi wants to come in and say more on that, but there's lots of work going on to get an improvement in this area. And the second thing that I'd like to highlight to board is that for 2021-22, the board will now not meet its targets for Staph aureus bacteremia, C. difficile or E. coli infection prevention control targets. However, they do remain within the predicted levels for all of these infections, and plans are in place to reduce the incidence infection. And no areas of concern have been raised by Scottish Government. Thanks.
Thanks, Gaynor. Any questions for Gaynor? Or any comments? Indeed for Anne as well. If not, we can move on to Alex and the Finance, Resources and Performance Committee.
Thanks, Boyd. Yeah, most of what we discussed at the FRP, the finance, the performance, the annual delivery plan, etc., we've covered again in the board today, and that was fine. The only additional thing is that as of the next meeting, we will also be taking a report from the Environment Sustainability Board, which Alan Wilson, etc., is setting up. So we'll be able to report on that from then on. Thanks.
Thank you. Any questions for Alex? If not, Alistair on audit.
No, nothing to add. The item I was going to refer to, I did under 15B, so nothing else.
Any points for Alistair? Not on to Katrina and the Area Clinical Forum.
Thank you. I don't have anything to add to the minute that's there.
Thanks, Katrina. Any points for Katrina? Staff governance, Sarah.
Thank you. Really, any areas that I would have brought to your attention have been discussed today on our own agenda, so I don't think I have anything additional that I need to bring to your attention.
The IJB, Sarah.
Thank you. Yep, and we have actually had since then had another IJB, but just to pick up the minutes from the March one, we set the budget, and it was our last meeting with those council members. And we've obviously moved on since then, but nothing additional to report from that particular IJB. Thank you.
Any questions for Sarah on either staff governance or the IJB? Nothing indicated. So we're asked to confirm that we've had adequate assurance from the Governance Committee minutes, and that we note the minutes on the agreed actions from the Area Clinical Forum and the Argyll and Bute IJB. I'm going to take it that we're content with that. Okay, thank you. Any other competent business? Just to note that the next public meeting will be on the 28th of June. That's an additional meeting, which will be in the afternoon after the conclusion of the annual accounts meetings. So probably with a 2:30 start time. And the next scheduled meeting on the 26th of July, when we'll be considering the strategy amongst other things. Just to inform you that Argyll and Bute Council have nominated Councillor Garrett Corner, a member for Mid Argyll, to be their representative on the board. And we await a nomination from Highland Council. I think that will be next week sometime that will have an indication of who the Highland Council representative will be to replace Deirdre. Well, with that, I think we have come to the end, miraculously in time, of a long meeting, another long meeting, and thank you all for your contributions throughout the day, and we'll conclude the meeting now and wish you a good afternoon as some of us head off for the good news of the spending review.
Bye, folks. You're obviously an optimist, Boyd. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.